There's so much freedom on the other side of our suffering, and being selfish should be a requirement, because if I'm not going to prioritize me and take care of myself and do what's best for me, then I'm only going to be a modified, smaller version of myself for everybody else.
Nothing that you presented today is about conquering or mastery. It's about the awareness piece. Am I actively closing the gap? Hello there, it's me, Steve Mellor, and welcome in to Growth Ready, the podcast that allows high performers to reveal the reality behind what it means to ready yourself for growth, the personal and professional challenges along the growth journey, while also allowing the high-performance executive coach in me to satisfy his curiosity toward what drives optimal performance. On this episode, we welcome the CEO of SolutionPoint Plus, Joe Smarro, who challenges us to invest in the practice of self-awareness and introspection.
If people would just spend more time being genuinely curious about who they are, like truly who they are, not their titles, like who are you?
Joe's respect for the work required to develop himself comes from his commitment to representing himself and what he wants his life to look like. And he spends his days traveling the world to ready others to approach their growth the same. Hey guys, as we get started here with the episode, I want to just take 1 minute of your time to make a request for you to subscribe and rate the show. For our show to be easily discovered by other potential listeners, we need our current listeners, that's you, to take the time to not only subscribe, but to also rate the show. Whether you're listening to us on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, whatever platform of choice, there are typically ways to be rating the show. So go ahead and click something like that 5th star and be sure to take that additional time to leave a comment or two about why it is you enjoyed listening to the Growth Ready podcast. Your efforts on this will allow our show to be more discoverable, which means we're going to find more listeners and continue to have that significant impact on the community of human performance and personal development that I know you are all benefiting from by being listeners to this show. Please go ahead, take the time, subscribe, rate the show today. Hey, and while you're at it, why don't you share it with a few people as well? I appreciate you guys. Let's get to the interview. Hello there, and welcome back into the most recent installment of the Growth Ready podcast. I am very much looking forward to our conversation today as we welcome in Joe Smarro to the show. And quite frankly, I know this gentleman has a story, and I have no doubt that we're going to get into so much of it throughout the conversation. But Joe, as always, I cannot let you go another second further within this podcast without asking you and having you answer the question, what does it mean to you to be growth ready?
Steve, first of all, thank you for sharing your audience with me. I appreciate it. And so for me to be growth ready is a constant state of curiosity that starts with self-awareness and introspection. And that would be the most succinct way that I could answer that question. But it is a constant state of curiosity starting with self-awareness and introspection.
So these are words that curiosity is a consistent word in terms of how people respond to this question. However, my favorite thing about all these words that sometimes get used frequently on the show is that everyone has their own way of defining it. Everyone's not reading, they're not opening the dictionary and saying curiosity is defined as.
Yes.
You are somehow leaning into what your experience has been of how maybe you've used curiosity, and you're allowing us straight away to get a first-hand look at like, okay, Joe looks at curiosity this way, and now I get to ask because. So when you talk about the introspection and also the self-awareness, I'm curious, like, why those two elements in terms of how we look at curiosity?
Yeah. So for me, it's I think of everything as like, for example, if I do a keynote, one of the things I tell people is, I want to challenge all of your BS. And people are like, interesting. I'm like, no, that's your belief system. So, and I talk about this also in the book too, but it's like so much of our beliefs, so much of the way we think about the world, the way we view relationships, the way we view love, the way we view finances, the way we view success is inherited from family, from community, from school, from zip code. And it never was ours. And I think when I look at the world through the lens of collective suffering, in that I believe in like truth and love and all of this, but if we know the data tells us that the suicide numbers are where they are, that anxiety and depression are two of the most common mental health diagnoses worldwide, that over half of marriages fail and 20+% more than that stay together for kids or finances. It's like, well, maybe we don't actually know the quote unquote right way to do things. And then I ask, is there a right way to do things? And so for me, I fully embody this idea. And this has been through a lot of years of work and therapy for me, Steve, because, and I'm sure we'll get into it, but having a life riddled with trauma growing up as a child, a lot of my ideas of normalcy were taken away, and the idea of safety was taken away. And so here I go navigating my adult life, making mistake after mistake, poor choice after poor choice, hurting people, not physically, but emotionally. And then finally getting to this realization of like, wait a minute, like everything is my fault. And once I got to that place of freedom, it was this wide-eyed, like, oh my goodness, there's so much freedom on the other side of our suffering. And so for me, it really starts with this idea of like, if we would all just be willing to be more selfish. And society has done such a terrible job of kind of bastardizing that word of like being selfish is bad. But no, being selfish should be a requirement, because if I'm not going to prioritize me and take care of myself and do what's best for me, then I'm only going to be a modified, smaller version of myself for everybody else. And I just don't think enough people think this way. And so when I say be curious, I'm talking about everything. Why do you believe what you believe? Why do you get mad when you're mad? Why do you feel the way you feel? Why do you eat what you eat? Why do you spend your money the way you spend? If people would just spend more time being genuinely curious about who they are, like truly who they are, not their titles, not their, I'm a podcast host, I'm a baker, I'm a pilot. No, you're not. That's how you spend your time. Like, who are you? And I don't think enough people spend time there. And so I know that's a lot of words, but it's how I can answer that question best, Steve.
Well, yeah. Well, you just gave me an entire roadmap for this conversation, so I appreciate that. But the first thing that I heard there that I want to address, and coming from my background in sport, and I know you've been in the military, that you've been in law enforcement, so the one thing I notice in the world of sport, and I'd love for you to speak to this from your experience, is that the majority of the belief systems that are created tend to be the reasons why we get in our own way, as opposed to help us succeed. Like, the work goes into how can we navigate these inner beliefs, these inner stories that are at play to prevent us from optimal performance, let's say, as an athlete. How do we circumnavigate those and start to speak to ourselves more effectively so that those are no longer at play, those are no longer preventing us from excelling? And I'm curious, just from your research and from your experience, what is it about the human journey that's allowing our belief systems to go in this almost direction of prevention? We're preventing ourselves from being our best, as opposed to positioning ourselves to be our best.
Yeah, it's such a great question. And the thing that comes up for me, Steve, is that we, at a very young age, give away a lot of our power, almost all of it. And what I mean by that is so much of our worth and our identity is tied to external validation, whether that's in school and getting a grades, or it's in sports and getting a trophy, or it's in business and getting money. So much of our internal worth comes from external, worldly, other people validation. And we've lost the ability to give ourselves the thing we need. And so when we become fully dependent on anything outside of ourselves to give us the internal reward that we're looking for, we're in a very dangerous place, because that's going to breed codependency. It's going to breed all kinds of other issues. Again, suffering in silence, anxiety, all the stuff that we talk about. And so it's like, if we could, and I'll be honest, like, this is stuff I'm working through still to this day. As of yesterday with my therapist, is, as someone that's running a successful business, someone that, but again, I've had a lot of failure in my life too, right? Multiple failed marriages. And so it's this constant like tug of war of, yes, I'm getting awards, I'm getting accolades, I'm getting recognized for this work, but that's all based on output. I love this saying, and it's like the only thing in life that matters is how you feel about yourself when you're by yourself. And I'll be honest, for most of my life, when I'm by myself, it's not a great place to be. There's a lot of inner critic. It's very loud. I could do more. I should have done better. I have a lot of shame. I have a lot of guilt. I have a lot of secrets. And so that is just like punishing me. And I think when that happens at scale, especially from an early age, now it's like I'm just in survival mode. So this idea of performance or leveling up or becoming a greater version of myself is so far removed, because it's like I just have to figure out how to keep all of this contained so that the world doesn't actually see me. So that people, because now I've got them fooled, right? I've created this representative self. I'm an athlete. I'm a successful business owner, and people identify me as that. That feels good. But oh, if they knew, if they only knew. And so then we work really hard just to maintain. And I think that's the thing that really prevents us from leveling up or outperforming our own, even what we believe is capable, is because we're just holding on to this idea that people, like how people see us when we're doing good enough is good enough. And so we don't want to rock the boat and risk failure, because again, what if I take this risk or I take this chance and it doesn't work? Well, then I'm going to be seen as a failure. Then I'm going to be exposed. And if there's one thing about the ego of man, especially high performers, alphas, athletes, they do not want to be exposed. Weaknesses, mindset, any area, because they're afraid that, it's a vulnerability that's going to be taken advantage of. It's going to somehow infiltrate their performance and then prevent them from doing the thing that they're known for. So it's a complex question, and I don't know that I answered it well, but I think that's what comes up for me is there's this, it's really fear and safety wins, because the idea of anyone seeing me as a human being trying to improve and it not working is way too scary.
Yeah. And I think what you helped me understand there is this idea that so much of these patterns of how we think are established early in life. And for me, as a parent of young children currently, the amount of conviction I feel in those moments when I hear statements like that, and I just go, my goodness, how much damage am I actually doing to these children every single day? I'm so aware of it. I'm asking myself all the time. I'm praying for patience when I know it's lacking, all these kind of things. And then I also think about my own childhood and the ways in which these stories were formed. And over time, I had the decision in this version of myself that I showed up as. And I like how you put it, this representative self, if you will. Like, how do we represent ourselves in certain environments? And how often is that a complete disassociation from the private self, the version of ourselves when we are left alone and no one else is around? Yep. And going back now to my question earlier of this idea of the way in which we're maybe preventing ourselves versus positioning ourselves, that was the word I was exposed to as an athlete myself, and also coaching athletes, was you were trying to get this version of oneself to perform as a version of a different self. Like, if they were left to be themselves when they competed, the way that they are more likely speaking to themselves when left alone and quiet at the end of the day, they're not going to perform well. And it's this conditioning that we're creating for ourselves of, okay, what's the version of me that I need to be in order to excel in this environment? But then when I remove myself from that environment, how big of a gap is that between the version of myself I'm working my butt off to be in this environment versus the version of myself that I'm sat with at the end of the day when no one else is around?
Absolutely. Yeah. Well articulated. And it's spot on. And I think when that gap is wide, between like the performance of my representative self. And then, the bigger that gap is of when I'm on my own, and now it's like, I don't even know who this version is. Like all these things I'm doing in the dark per se, that I wouldn't want the public to know, or my family to know, or anyone to know. The wider that gap is, I think the more difficult the challenge is to overcome it, because again, there's more to protect. And not that I would be so grandiose, Steve, to answer your prayers, but something I tell parents of young children is when they come home with a project or whatever, they're like, Dad, I got this A. Are you so proud of me? I tell them, do not tell them yes. Like, don't answer them. Just reflect it back and say, are you proud of you? And if they're like, well, yeah, I'll be like, then that's what matters, right? I mean, it's a simple way to just teach the skill early of, hey, listen, my love for you is unconditional. And because you're my child, I'm going to love you. I'm going to see you through all your choices, your mistakes, your falls, everything. But what really matters for me is that you recognize that you put in the work, you got the result you wanted, and that's proportional to the work you put into it. Once you can develop that and you can be proud of yourself, that's powerful. And again, that's not, parents aren't talking like this. I didn't, right? I didn't know this stuff till later in life, but the goal is, ideally, hopefully, once we know better, we do better, right? And so I tell my kids are 26, 18, 14, 13. And I tell my 26-year-old, I'm like, hey, I'm sorry, Lex. Like, I know you see me parent very different than you got, but I just didn't know any better, right? It's just, it's kind of how it works. But interesting. I just wanted to share that, Steve.
No, it's a conditioning, man. It's a conditioning. There's no doubt about it. Yeah. And for me now, I want to really lean into that gap that you just alluded to, and how we might dare to close it over time. And what I would like to believe as well is that we can close it in a way where this version of ourselves that we maybe aren't so pleased with, comfortable with, etc., we're moving away from that person closer to this, maybe, I don't want to say performative, but that's what I love about your word representative, like this representative self, because it makes me think of, okay, who is it you're striving to become, and why does it matter to you to become that version of yourself? So walk us through and give us some context around as well the work that you do today, and then lead us into, okay, if we were to start closing this gap, if someone's listening to this right now and they're like, Joe, you've caught me hook, line, and sinker, brother. Like, I go home at night and I don't like the person I see in the mirror. I really am scared of those moments where I'm left alone and I don't want to be alone, etc. So help some of these folks understand how we might start to navigate this gap.
Yeah, I think the first thing that comes up for me is, do you even know like what the gap is? Second is, like, have you spent time actually writing down like what you would like your life to look like? Not what it is, not what other people told you it should be, right? What I call the disease to people please. And so many people are living their lives in accordance with other people's expectations of what they should have done or what they could have done. And so when we do that, again, I think we're depriving ourselves of what we actually want. If people would be willing to be completely honest with themselves first, again, journal it. It can be private. You don't have to show anyone. You don't have to tell anyone. But like, when you wake up, what do you want to see? Where do you want to be? When you open your windows, what do you want it to look like? How do you want to spend your time? Do you want to exchange time for money? Do you want to own a business? Do you want to have a family? Do you not want to have a family? Do you, like, the more we can take complete ownership of how we want our life to be spent, and then be very mindful of like, how close am I to this ideal future state, if you will? How close am I to this? Like, what realistically has to be done? Because here's what's going to happen for a lot of people. And I see this with some of my friends as well. And just a quick thread to pull is, a good buddy of mine grew up, high school, best friends, military, all this stuff. And he was very clear. I do not want to get married. I'm sorry. I do not want to have a child. Like, I know I don't want to have kids, but I want to be married. Wife is cool. She's like, all right, I'm good with that. Let's get married. They get married. Wife says, I really want to have a baby. He was like, yeah, but I was honest. I don't want to have a baby. And she was like, well, I do want to have a baby. And ultimately, we're going to have a kid, or I don't want to be married. And he's like, well, I took my vows serious. Like, I want to stay married. And she was like, well, I want a baby. And he was like, I don't. So he gives in. Can we just have one baby? Yes, she says. So they get pregnant. They have a kid. And then a couple years later, she was like, I want a divorce. And he's so upset that he's like, man, I didn't want to have this kid. I wanted to be married. Now, he's a great father. He loves his daughter. Please don't hear that wrong. But because he did not honor his actual desire. Now he's left paying child support, having to raise a daughter in a split home, which is something he never wanted to do. And it's all because he denied himself. Now take that one example and think about that in your career. Think about that in every area of your life, right? And how I broke my life personally down is into these categories of what I call health, wealth, spirituality, and relationships. Those are the 4 pillars of my life. And I look at these 4 pillars as a dashboard. Where am I at? How am I doing? How can I get better? And they always have room to get better. So the first thing is inventory. What do I want my ideal future state, my life to look like? But if you're already quote unquote too late, you're like, well, I didn't want to do this, but here I am. Or if you're in a job you don't love and you're like, well, I can't leave because of pension, and you become a prisoner to the pension. I left my job in policing at 15 years. You don't get a pension for 20 years. And people were like, Joe, you are an idiot. And I was like, yeah, but I'm not happy. And the response to me was, none of us are, but you don't quit. And I'm like, that is terrible counsel, right? Like if that's the collective thought, is like, yeah, none of us are happy, but we just suffer through it and we just wait for this pension to come just to be miserable later. No, thanks. Like, I don't want to do that. And so it was me choosing to end my career pre-pension. It was me betting on myself to start this business and be like, let's see if we can figure this out. Jesse, also my friend, quitting the job as well and coming with me, and we're navigating this. But those are examples of, the world is going to, like the great Dr. Susan David says, the price of admission for a life well lived is suffering. And I think the more good you try to do in the world, the harder it's going to be. But as soon as you try to manage other people's emotions about your life and your behaviors and your choices, you're just going to suffer. It's none of your business what other people think of you. If we could truly, and I know that's easier said than done, but if we could detach ourselves completely from what other people think about us or say about us, as long as we know this is what life looks like for me and I'm going to live in alignment to this. There is no rule book, right? There's societal constructs. And then do I want to align with that construct or do I not? And if you don't, it doesn't make you wrong and it doesn't make you a bad person. But too many people make way too many concessions trying to fall in line to just mimic a life of someone else because that's what they think is the right thing to do. And they're really, really lonely in their marriages, in their careers, in their lives. And it's because they're not choosing themselves.
Something you said there, denying yourself, is such a powerful term. It's so,
Yep.
I mean, you really cut to a deep part of me the moment you said those words, simply because I looked at the first 35 years of my life as someone who was doing everything you just encouraged us to really not do. You know, I was operating in a world of swimming. I swam at a high level. I coached at a high level. I told myself the convenience of this world is actually the reason I'm supposed to be in this world. But it was the convenience of it that kept me in it.
Yep.
It wasn't the satisfaction. It wasn't the joy. And the irony is that when I look back on the work I was doing at that time, I qualified it as you got to work hard to get to where you want to get to. And I look back at how I worked then, and I wasn't working as hard as I claimed. I really tried to convince myself that I was suffering because of my output, but I was suffering because of my willingness to endure for the wrong reasons.
Yep.
And the irony is that you and I are both entrepreneurs. We both know that when you start a business, you have no business, right? Yeah. And so you gotta get boots on the ground. You got to get word out there. You got to do the work. You got to suffer. And I ended up finding out through the building of my own business that this is what hard work is. This is really what suffering is. It's towards a cause that aligns with who you want to be.
Yes.
And the way in which we deny ourselves of those opportunities, it doesn't have to be a new business. It doesn't have to be a marriage or whatever it is, but there's something there that I would argue all of us in some capacity at some point in our life, we've allowed ourselves to be denied of an opportunity, even though we wanted it. We qualified a reason not to go after it, and we denied ourselves.
Yes. Yeah. And I fully agree with that. And I think it's like it starts as a whisper and becomes a nag. And I appreciate you because people often misconstrue when I say this and they're like, are you advocating that everyone should start a business? And I'm like, no, this has nothing to do with business. That's just my example of my story and my arc. But for you, it could be anything else, right? But it's listening for that like thing that's just like been, hey, I wonder if, right? Like even in writing a book, not everyone has had that butterfly land on them, that thought or that idea, but I had it for over a decade and I just kept like, yeah, but I wasn't really good in school. What do I know about writing books? And it was all these excuses of like, but it just wouldn't go away. And it was like, I really want to like write this book, but I don't know how. And that gap is too scary for me. And I don't know how to navigate that. And so I just kept shutting it down and shutting it down. And so that's just another example for people listening of like, just pay attention to yourself. Stop busying yourself with distractions of phones and media and just consuming things and listen to yourself and pay attention to like, what is the thing that keeps coming up for you the most? And then are you willing to like take a meaningful step towards that? Because I agree with you, Steve. It's like, yeah, until I started a business and left my career and suddenly had no safety net, no paycheck coming in 2 weeks, like, this has to work. I didn't know what real hard work was. And this is, again, as a Marine, but like you're told very clearly what to do. That's not really thinking. You just have to respond to leaders. Very different. This was a different game of, there's a lot of people relying on this. There's like families are depending on this. We have to succeed. We have to bring revenue in. We have to, and it suddenly becomes a lot of pressure. There's no hours. I'm not like, it's 6 p.m. I'm off. Like, no, if this is what you're going to do. But the thing I loved most about what you said, Steve, is that it actually finally aligns with like what matters most to me. And in our company, SolutionPoint Plus, right? Like our goal is to eradicate suicide amongst all of our client professions. Now, yes, we teach human behavior. We teach de-escalation techniques. We do wellness and resiliency and mind management. But ultimately, it's towards giving people this idea or planting this seed that they're always worthy of tomorrow and that suicide should not be the outcome of their life because it gets hard. And we want to collectively raise the emotional intelligence of everyone that comes through our trainings or our seminars so that we just realize like, an emotion is just a vibration in the body. I don't have to act from this place that's going to create some type of destruction. I can just sit in this feeling for a little while and witness it. And then I can choose something that actually serves me. And if we can create that behavior in people at scale, I really think that we're going to create meaningful change. And again, we've seen it in the work we've done, but it's so rewarding for me to now, like, the sacrifices, I'm on the road 20 days a month. I'm in hotels, I'm in rental cars, I'm in airports. But you know what? Like getting to stand in front of a room of people that come in as like, oh gosh, here we go. Another like wellness talk. And then them saying like, whoa, that was the best thing I've ever heard. Joe, for the first time in 28 years, you gave me hope. I came into this week thinking I was going to kill myself, but you just inspired me to keep fighting. Like grown men crying. I'm like, this is exactly, not that I tie my worth to those outcomes. I want to be very clear.
Sure.
But I feel incredible pride when I'm by myself in that hotel room at night, knowing like I just gave them my all today. And the fact that it landed is bonus, but I know I poured everything I could. I prepared. I put efforts into this to make sure that everything was spot on the way I wanted it to be. I feel good about the effort I put in. The fact that it landed really well is just bonus. And again, I'm super blessed and fortunate, but it was a lot of risk. It was a lot of fear. It was a lot of therapy that got me to this place. I don't want to minimize it and make it sound like it was easy because it wasn't.
No, not at all. And so many of the upticks in my life came from therapy too. Is that the joke I've told a couple of times on this podcast is that I've been with my therapist just a couple months longer than I've been with my wife. And so I'm almost scared to leave my therapist at this point. It's just like, what will that mean for my marriage? But babe, I love you. But the fact is that you're helping us understand now when we go back to when I asked you what it means to be growth ready and you open with curiosity, you speak to the self-awareness, you speak to the introspection. Those weren't just terms to define curiosity. Those were the steps of like curiosity is the willingness to become self-aware. Curiosity is the willingness to practice introspection. And like, and for like understanding this now, as we talk through this, what I also want to just emphasize too, is that the reason why I know that we're not encouraging people to leave their W-2 and become an entrepreneur is that you spoke about your 4 buckets earlier of how you look at your life, and I didn't hear professional, I didn't hear company, I didn't hear business. I heard health, wealth, spirituality, and relationships. When you come back to that point of assessment at the end of the day when things are quiet and no one else is around, and you're assessing life through 4 filters, if you will, like that, even if the workshop doesn't go great, even if the speaking performance isn't to the standard that you're typically accustomed to, you can stop in that moment and say, yeah, but how did my approach satisfy these 4 areas? And I think that we have never had someone come on the show and help us understand growth from the perspective of how are you assessing it when you're alone?
Yep.
How are you internalizing growth? How are you allowing yourself to say, in this moment, how do I feel about growth? And that's a hard hill to climb. Interestingly, even though that is an individual assessment, I think what you've alluded to is already and helping us understand is that you don't climb that hill alone. Is that you have to be well supported, rely on professionals along the way to develop that muscle, to have that inner work be effective when left to your own devices.
Absolutely. Yes. And one of the most powerful experiences that I went through was as I was leaving my job as a police officer. A mentor told me, he said, Joe, I want you to write your obituary. And I was like, that's dark. Like, geez, man, I'm just quitting my job. Like, it's not that deep. And he goes, no, I want you to write, but take your time, like take a couple weeks and really think through it. And I did. And he was like, let me know when you're done. So I finished it. We set up a Zoom. He's like, let me read it. So I show it to him. He reads it and he goes, okay. He goes, now listen, you're starting on this journey of entrepreneurship. It's going to be hard. You're going to get a lot of no's. You're going to get rejection. He goes, but here's what I think is important. Treat this document like a living document. Every time you get a no or rejection or it feels hard, he goes, I want you to pay attention to what you wrote on this, because none of that stuff, a lot of those decisions that are going to feel hard, they didn't make it into this obituary. So they're probably not that important after all. And that experience for me was like, okay, this is now where I can see, like, how do I feel about myself when I'm by myself? I got my 4 dashboards. Mm-hmm. I can see in real time, like, where am I at? What energy can I pour into one of these to just level up a little bit? And again, it's not about punishing myself, but it really is about improving myself, leveling up, because I just believe that if we have cognitive ability and a heartbeat, we can get better. And that's something that I don't ever want to become complacent and feel like good enough is good enough. I really want to continue to push myself to be like, what are the limits? How much further can I push this? But never getting distracted by the outcome as if that's the end goal. Truly, and as cliche as it is, but like truly falling in love with the journey of the discovery of like, who do I have to become to get to this next goal? Because who I am right now doesn't have this thing that I want. I can accept that. It's because I don't have the skill. I don't have the language. I don't have the network. I don't have the whatever it is. So I have to develop and grow some area of my skill set so that I can reach that next goal. Cool. That's the process. That's the journey. And along the way, it's like, yeah, managing these things of like, I don't want to lose the sense of what matters to me the most. And I've told my family, it's in my obituary. When I die, I don't want all these words on a tombstone. I want Joseph Smarro, 1981 to whenever I died, and then just the word love. Because that's all I want to be known for is like, man, that guy loved hard. Not dedicated husband, father, military veteran. Like, no, just put love. That's all that we want to know this. That's all I want to be known for is like that guy didn't care what you did, where you came from, what choices you made. He saw like the intrinsic value of you and believed you deserved loved. And ultimately his life's work was to learn to love himself so that he could better serve other people. And it was from this like highest level of selfishness. It's how I sign every book, Be Selfish. I have t-shirts with the company logo that say Selfish AF, but it's just this idea of, can I learn to truly love myself so that I can better show up and serve everybody else? And that's my legacy. That's the way I want to be remembered.
Mm. Well, our listeners love a challenge, and I think we've just given them one, is take on the obituary exercise or just find that one word that you want your life to be associated with. I mean, that's something I just heard there that I think, gosh, I mean, I'm going to do that later today. I know for sure. I'm going to sit with that thought and just go, if there were a word that I want, you know, ideally 45 to 50 years from now, my life to be associated with, what would that one word be? And I can't use love either because that's your word. So
Love is shared, man.
I love it. I think it's a great challenge. I think it's a great way for us to get introspective and practice what it is you're encouraging us to do. And let's move to selfishness now, because for me, I'm going to need one of those T-shirts, by the way. But from a selfishness standpoint, where do we start? Because it's I know this is true. And I as an executive coach, I'm working with folks consistently on this idea of, if our entire session is about the people around you, how much development are you really making in our time? And so I understand the concept of selfishness, but I think a good place for us to start is just to maybe getting our listeners to a point of acceptance. You've used that word a lot. And what I really appreciate about you using acceptance is you're not necessarily using the word comfort, because I think that's really important. I think sometimes we hear that in these kind of conversations is, you got to get comfortable with this. You got to get comfortable with that.
Yeah.
I've never been comfortable with selfishness. I'm practicing it, and it will never be something I get comfortable with, but I do accept it. And so how can we start to accept the concept of selfishness?
Yeah. And first I want to just push that, because and again, it was through therapy for me. And I for sure had, because of, and I'm a 44-year-old man that still battles insecurities and abandonment issues in my relationship. And so because of that, I would consistently and frequently, concede and give in to something I didn't want to do. So here's the quick narrative is, I live in South Texas. It's hot. It's 107 degrees outside. My wife loves the heat. She loves being outside. And she'll say, hey, do you want to go for a walk at 2 p.m. on a Sunday? And I'm like, historically, in my mind, it's like, in what world do you live in that you think this is a good idea? As I'm behaviorally like, yeah, let's do that. Now, why am I behaviorally doing that? Because in my mind, if I tell her no, she is going to be upset with me. She's going to start to go down this thing of like, he doesn't do what I want to do. I'm upset. And then because I'm a man, I don't want to go too far on this, but for sure, I probably want to have some intimacy with my wife at some point. And so I better act right. This is the thoughts I have. Now, my therapist is like, Joe, you have to stop doing this, because what happened is I get up, I go on this walk. In my mind, I'm regretting it. I'm sweating now. I just wanted to sit down and watch football. I was comfortable in my recliner. I'm conceding. I'm doing something I don't want to do for you. She has no idea this is happening, by the way. Then we get back home. She's like, yay. My husband went on a walk with me. This is awesome. I'm frustrated and annoyed because I missed part of the game. And then that night we go to bed and I'm like, okay, I did something that I didn't want to do for her. Surely she's going to now meet my needs as I lay there and watch her fall asleep. And I'm like, well, that didn't work out. So all I'm doing is every time I deny myself, I'm building in resentment for somebody else. And if people would understand that when you say no to someone else, you say yes to yourself. So that's part one. Now this is very hard. And I would say it's not comfortable at all. When my wife now says, do you want to do this? And my answer is no, I say no. And she will say like, are you sure? Cause I'm like, absolutely not. I don't want to do that. And I feel really good about that now because it's me saying yes to myself. It's ultimately a boundary. Now that came from the support of my therapist for sure. And doing that. This idea of how do we become selfish? That's one example of it. But I think, again, it's like, because people that if you're not in a relationship, you're like, well, how does this apply to me? Again, take it to a professional setting. There's an expectation based on your job scope and what you're supposed to do. And if a leader says, hey, I need you to do this, I'm not advocating that you're like, no, I don't want to do that. You could, but you have to accept there's consequence. And I think, again, it's just this idea of when people can become so aware, so self-aware of what they're willing to do, what they're not willing to do, and then live with integrity within those guardrails, regardless of if people are going to have a reaction to it. Because if you're saying like, no, I'm not willing to do this thing, regardless of consequence, that doesn't make you a bad person. It doesn't make you wrong. And I think when people view the world as binary and they're looking for this rule book that doesn't exist, but society has kind of placed on us of like, this is how you're supposed to act, right? I refer to this as like the American order of operations, and I'm sure it's the same in most, culture, but it's go to school, get good grades, go to college, get a degree, get a career, get a house, buy a house, or get a career, get a spouse, buy a house, have kids, pay your taxes, die. And as long as you do that in that order, life is going to be great. And the amount of people that I've helped in my mental health professional career that have done exactly that and are absolutely miserable and suicidal started to challenge my idea of like, wait a minute, because I didn't do that. I had a kid in high school, which changed the course of my life. I joined the military because of that. Then I became a cop because of the military. I was always the victim or passenger in my own life. And it wasn't until the idea for the business, the passion for people, for speaking, for training, where I was like, this is the first time I'm actually betting on myself. Mm-hmm. And yeah, it's one of those things where, are we willing to do the hard thing, even if it doesn't work? And the thing that bothers me the most, Steve, is when people look at success, right? Or they look at the people who have had success, they're like, well, that worked for them, but that would never work for me. And it's like, if everybody thought that way, then nothing would ever change or move, right? Mm-hmm. Like, you only see us at the top of having some success or accolade, or like, oh, they made it. But people don't see or remember the struggle from like that first month, 6 months, 1 year, 2 years of not having a security net, not having a paycheck, sleepless nights, the fear, the grind, trying everything you possibly can. How do I reinvest the money just to get some piece of success? So then it becomes this like lost thing where it's like they only see you at the top and they're like, that's too far away. And I think as not just entrepreneurship, but I think anybody that's in a position of leadership, one, should never forget where they came from, but two, should share the journey and the struggle, not to scare people, but to remind people that like the suffering is hard and the suffering is part of the process, and it's not for everybody. And some people truly are okay with complacency and just like finding their groove of convenience you talked about earlier. And it's like, this is comfortable for me. And so I'm just going to stay here and play small and deny myself forever and then retire and live with a ton of regret. And I don't want to, I don't want that to be me. And then just one more piece real quick is, one of the most powerful experiences for me was my father died 11 years ago this year. He was only 53, had cancer. But I spent the last 48 hours of his life on his deathbed out in Houston. And he died so angry. And I remember that experience as a powerful one. And my dad and I didn't have a great relationship growing up. We started to get close right before he got sick. We didn't know he was sick. I was building my first house, and then he became a part of that process, and we started like bonding. It was beautiful, but then he got sick and very quickly was gone. But I remember reframing all of the stuff that happened, and it's like, man, thank you, Dad, for teaching me this lesson on your way out, albeit a negative one, but it was still like I could reframe that to gratitude, because I pictured myself in that position if I were sick and I knew I was dying. How much regret do I want to have? How much do I want to be angry on my deathbed as I go to the other side of whatever's happening and just lay there angry that I didn't get to live the life that I wanted? No, thanks. And all of that played a role in me quitting my job, starting the business, writing the books, putting myself out there to fail, because I just don't want to be in a position where I know that my death is near and I am mad about it because I didn't do the thing that I wanted to do all along because I was trying to please somebody else. And I'm just not willing to do that.
Thank you for all that. And it is such a shame that so often those greatest lessons come from those truly, most difficult moments. Something that I'm hearing consistently throughout everything you just said is how willing are we to not only practice selfishness? You're encouraging us to say, be more selfish, do what I want to do, etc. But at the same time, something you said right at the outset is you helped yourself understand and get to this point of acceptance by saying, if everything is my fault, if I'm the cause of the issue, or I can at least approach things telling myself that, or asking the question, sorry, what if it was my fault? What if it was me that was creating this issue?
Yep. Then
suddenly we are forced to lean in with this very word that you opened us up with curiosity. If you suddenly say, if you suddenly start saying like this bad thing that's happening to me right now, how about I just assume it's my fault to begin with? And if it were to be my fault, why would it be my fault? And if I can confirm that it is in fact something to do with me as to why I'm here, then selfishly, what can I do about it? Or what do I want to do about it? Or how would I like this to be different in the future? What could be some of those steps? And we start to see this roadmap. And this is so important now. I want to just stress, because it would be easy for us to stop right now and just say, so if you're working in that 9 to 5 and you're not happy anymore, put your pen down on the desk, let everyone say, screw you guys, I'm out of here. Like that's not what we're saying, because this is the beauty of the work that you're doing with SolutionPoint Plus, is you're going into organizations. I assume that people keep asking you to keep coming because you are in fact not encouraging all their employees to leave and start whatever it is that they've always dreamt of doing, blah, blah, blah. You're just simply helping people prioritize themselves, period. Like, you are worth the prioritization. You are worth being the most important person in your life. And that's the readiness piece of this show. It's like, are you ready to make yourself the priority? Like, can you answer that question? And if you can, with a hell yeah, then it's like, well, what you going to do about it? And like, I would want to believe that that's at the heart of so much of this work that you're doing with these organizations year in, year out.
Yeah. And I want to just call out, Steve, that was an absolute masterclass of listening. The way you just pulled this entire conversation together, world class. So kudos to you. Not that you were looking for that, but that was really impressive how you just pulled that together. And what I do want to say, and this has kind of become a joke, but also not, but the way I can tie this is every time I go do a keynote or a seminar or a training, not every time, I don't want to embellish, several times though. For example, I just did one for NYPD in December. So three and a half months ago. I have had 2 people reach out to me, and 3 months later, by the way, send me a DM and say, hey, Joe, I just want you to know your talk really resonated. This is the part that stuck out the most. I just put in my 2 weeks. I'll be leaving the department, and I'm going to take a chance on myself. I always meet that with like, oh no, like, please tell me you have a plan. Please. And they're always like, yes, I have a plan. I've always wanted to do this. I love it. From the department side of this or from the company side of this, because yes, I don't want people to think of this as like, oh, Joe comes in and then suddenly we lose 3% of our workforce. Right. But the thing I really think is important is, would that be such a bad thing? If the people that do not want to be there don't want to be there, do we really want to keep them there? Because what I see so often in organizations is people will feel stuck because of complacency, because of comfort, because of all this stuff. And they're like, I guess this is it. I'm not happy. I always wanted to do something else. It's always on the back of my mind. So now you're going to maybe get 60% of my best effort. Then they promote, then they become leaders. And now suddenly they're frustrated leaders. You don't think that that's going to like project out onto the people that they're supposed to be leading when they're like, I never wanted to do this in the first place, right? And this is what happens, and I see this so often in not just police departments, but in companies and organizations, is you've got people that promote through the ranks when they knew they should have left 20 years ago. They knew they should have left 15 years ago. They know they should have left 1 year ago, but they're so afraid because it's now tied to their identity. So they just miserably suffer through it. And then they get into a position of influence where now their people are looking up like, what a terrible leader. This person's a terrible communicator. They don't listen, that nothing changes. They just want to do it the old archaic way. And it's because they're not into it. They have no joy. It doesn't mean anything to them. It's just a means to an end. And that is, to me, where if I can get people to say, enough is enough, I want to leave, those are the people we want to leave, because we don't want people doing any profession if their heart's not in it for the right reason or the cause, because that's just going to create a lot of like internal disruption. And so absolutely, some people after going through our stuff will bet on themselves and will pursue their dream that they've been putting off for so long. Not that that's the goal, right? Mm-hmm. The goal is truly do the hard work, learn to love yourself. What is it that you want to be known for? How do you want to feel when you're by yourself? And then how is it that you want to spend your time? Because we're not here for a long time. And if that's not what your life looks like right now, then what steps can I take towards that to make it a reality for me before it's too late, so that I don't die angry?
Yeah. No, it's so powerful to think that someone like yourself can go into an organization, and an organization can be so, the people in that organization can be so sure of, this is why I'm here, this is my job, etc. And suddenly now it's just like, but what if it wasn't? What if there was more to it than just the way you're currently operating? Because my thoughts immediately go to some of the conversations I have with clients is, I'm not confident enough to speak up in this meeting. Well, if you start practicing selfishness and you start practicing what's best for you, you may slowly start to build that muscle group internally to build that confidence behaviorally to start speaking up. And that can be the win. That could be the absolute life-changing decision for an individual that suddenly sets the course to a level of leadership in their career that they otherwise could never have fathomed, all because behaviorally, and this is where I love the alignment in the work that you do and I do, when we can behaviorally get curious, that's where the greatest shift happens, because we are a result of not only our beliefs, but also our behaviors.
Yes.
And so when we can break it down as simply as that, suddenly we just stop and go, well, shoot, if I was just more selfish around what it is I believe and bringing that into a reality in terms of what I want, and then I start to get selfish around the aligning behaviors that will allow that to happen, this thing called life gets a little bit simpler. It doesn't get easier, but it does get a little simpler. And I think that's what really at the heart of all of this, because I always like to simplify the crap out of everything. And while we have our mission statements and we have our elevator speeches of what we do and how we do it, I like to go even simpler. And I just like to say, that's what you're doing with these organizations.
Absolutely. Yeah. And if people would just realize the amount of freedom on the other side of their suffering, because that's ultimately what I hear you saying. And I'll tell you, like, I talk about this, but the thing that scared me the most was public speaking. I was absolutely terrified. And when I was on the police department and I got on the mental health unit, it was part of the job description. And so I got selected. I had never done public speaking before, but I knew I was terrified. And I told them, like, hey, I've never done this. So, like, I don't really want to do this, after I got picked, by the way. And they're like, yeah, too bad. It's part of the job. So, like, get good. And I was like, yeah, but I can't. And they forced me up there, and I was absolute dog water for probably 2 years. Like, I was so bad, but through repetition. And I'm talking about like a podium hugger, hiding behind the screen, sweating, flying through a class, not teaching anything, just reading slides. I was so bad. And I just kept doing it and just kept doing it, and then got better and then got better. And now it's how I make my entire living, is speaking. And I get paid good money to just go talk. And it was the thing I was most afraid of. And again, that's one example. The same thing with the book. I legitimately thought I was a stupid person because I didn't do well in high school, because I was essentially unhoused and didn't have safety and love and was physically abused and all this drama. And so I was like, yeah, I don't want to go home. I don't know where I'm going to sleep tonight. School is not like a place for me to learn. It's a place for me to survive. And so I thought I was a dumb person. And then I write a book and I'm like, man, find out the thing that's holding you back. Find out that inner critic that's really pushing on you, saying, no, you can't do this. If you can learn to, that's why I love Stoicism so much, but the great book, The Obstacle is the Way. And Ryan Holiday from Marcus Aurelius says, the impediment to action advances action. The obstacle in the way becomes the way. And if people would just realize the thing holding you back is your belief, but if you can learn to conquer that, it's amazing what's on the other side of that. And so just maybe lean into that and see what that is for you.
I love it. I mean, to really capture the essence of our entire conversation, man, like to live in this state of curiosity, we must practice self-awareness. We must practice this introspection, knowing that it allows us to identify a gap in ourselves that we then get to say, okay, well, if I'm going to notice a gap, I need to better define it, refine it, name it, really give it enough meat on the bone to say, now that I know what this gap is and what either side of it looks like, how can I lean in, practice these assets of curiosity, and be able to just simply say, on the other side of my suffering, there is this sense of freedom that will come from simply navigating the gap. And I want to, and this is one of my favorite things to say to clients. I may have said it once or twice on the podcast too, but nothing that you presented today is about conquering or mastery. It's about the awareness piece. It's about, am I actively closing the gap?
Yep.
Will I ever fully close it? You've alluded to that. There's someone who's practicing it and teaching it. You have yet to close it, and you probably never will, and neither will I. But that willingness
to
step towards it is so important.
Yeah. And it's exciting. For me, it's exciting. It really is. It's like to know I think too many people are distracted by a destination idea. And to me, there is no destination. Like there is no arrival. It's like how I view wellness, right? It's a constant pursuit. And when people think like it's about arrival, then what? Like I already know how the brain works. It's just going to say like, okay, that was cool, but now I want something. Like, it's never satiated. So then it's like, okay, if I can embrace the idea that there is no end, this is a constant pursuit of growth. This is a constant pursuit of evolution and breaking my life into these dashboards and seeing where can I level up, even if it's just in the next hour. That's the thing I want to do and focus my time on because I'm worthy of that. And if people would just realize how aligned selfishness, self-love, and self-worth are. To me, that when I talk about be selfish, it's self-aware, self-love, and self-worth. And to me, it's like, that's really where it is. Because if we had that, we wouldn't, not that we don't need people. I absolutely believe we need people. We need community. We need professionals. We need good, like, influence for sure. And we don't need any of them to feel a certain type of way, because everything we need to feel is already within us, because we've done that work to realize like everything I've ever wanted is already within me. And that's a deeply, deeply like spiritual belief.
Man, this has been an absolute blast. And I try to keep my episodes 40, 45 minutes. We're at 53 minutes right now. I could probably go another 53, which might mean that there's a part 2 at some point in our future, man. But this has been a blast. You've done this. There's this thing that I can assess as to the quality of the conversation, and it's how busy my notebook looks at the end of it. And so you're a page filler. You've conquered that. I need to almost make some t-shirts for that too, for the podcast. You're a growth ready page filler. But yeah, man, this has been a blast. I really do appreciate you coming on. The generosity of the insights has been phenomenal. Before I let you go, where can we learn more about yourself, about SolutionPoint Plus?
Yeah, both of those have websites. So joesmarro.com and solutionpointplus.com. And then same on all the socials, Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, Joe Smarro and SolutionPoint Plus. You can Google me. The books are on Amazon, documentaries on HBO called Ernie and Joe Crisis Cops. But really just Google my name and all the assets and everything will pull up. Pretty easy to find. And again, Steve, thank you so much. You did tell me on the front end you like to go 40, so we did a little overtime. But the conversation was fun, and truly kudos to you, brother, for just being an outstanding host and an incredible listener. It's a real gift. And so I just want to call that out for you.
Oh, I appreciate that. I appreciate it. And man, we're going to do this again at some point down the road, and I look forward to that time. But best of luck with everything, brother.
Thank you, brother. Be well.
Thank you for tuning in to Growth Ready. If you liked what you heard and are feeling ready to grow, be sure to leave a 5-star rating, subscribe to the show, and share the episode with someone you know is ready to fuel their growth journey today. We love our community, so don't hesitate to reach out to us at podcast@growthready.com. And until next time, we are Growth Ready, and you will be too.